Okay, so we're going to do our efforts in upgrading this Minn Kota power drive, which is a 50-pound thrust. Normally those don't come with any kind of co-pilots or iPilots. So what I did was I went ahead and ordered the part. So now I'm going to have an iPilot upgrade. So this will allow me to engage Spotlock, which a lot of people mix up Motor Guide's anchor and confuse that for Spotlock, but this will be iPilot with Spotlock integrated GPS system for the Minn Kota power drive, and this will go onto the new kayak. So some of you may remember I got stuck out there most of the time. Yeah, it's just gonna push to the left. Horrible. On the windy days, got blown around. I won't have to deal with that anymore. So let's start. Make sure that the Minn Kota power drive is not powered on before doing any of these steps. First thing you have to do in order to get this established, you're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 small screws you have to remove here from under the unit. These 4 screws will then allow you to fully disengage this cap. After, we're going to be removing several points here, several screws, 1 and 2 there. Those are going to be number size 3 screws, and we're going to do the same on the other side. That'll allow us to give us the ability to have access to the main board. All right, let's get started. At this point, I removed all 4 screws. I'm going to gently peel back this end. There we go. And just like that, we have now exposed this main compartment here. This will now give us the ability to deal with this. Now, most Minn Kota power drive upgrade kits, you will only get the top piece because that's basically all that we're replacing. This is the previous one, this is the upgraded one. As you can see, both caps fully match. Only difference is color. I wanted to get the black one, but unfortunately those are sold out due to product demand and resources. So a lot of people are buying and upgrading. So I went for the next best thing. Didn't want to wait any longer. Got the white one. As you can see, both of them have identical mounting ports, mounting holes to get the screws in. So let's get the next phase going. So in order to run that cable through here, I have to basically pop out this grommet here, this section here, and that's actually being held in by 2 screws. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna unscrew that, pop that off, and then go ahead and run the new cable through there. And also I just noticed this cable is fully exposed. If you can, try to neatly reattach it back to here. All right, let's take a look here. So as you can see, we removed both of those screws, and now that grommet should pop off. Fully expose that. Get rid of this. And now we can run the next cable. Okay, now that's run through. And now we just have to gently get this piece in here, back again. But before we do that, we gotta put that grommet back on. Now with the cable ran through and it's back in place, go ahead and tie down both of those screws. Okay, one of the complications you may deal with is if you have a power drive that has a shortened shaft, you're going to have excess cable. Unlike the other ones where they're not shortened shafts for kayaks, you will have less cable to deal with in this. But for cable management, try to remove the rest of the cables in this kind of manner. So you want to run it in here, as best as you can, just to be out of the way, so that way you can slide this back in place. It'll be tricky and you'll have to mess around with it.
Okay, at this stage, we've pretty much put the cap piece back on. We fed the main cable back through. The grommet's back installed. Now, what I did here with the cable, traditionally you're supposed to go ahead and wind that up around the winded main cable power supply there that goes to the main board. But what I did was I fed it right through. Don't do this. The reason you don't want to do this is because when you're on the water and you're rotating your motor, what ends up happening is the cable doesn't have enough length or enough slack for it to fully rotate comfortably. So the whole point of that spring rolled cable setup here is to actually give it some room, some length for it to rotate while the Minn Kota is in use. But again, this is just one method I did because I clearly didn't know about this part. You'll see later on that I had to learn the hard way. So after installing this through, what you want to do is here in this area is you want to put some type of a strap. I'm going to use a Velcro later on to make sure that stays in place. But from this perspective, what my primary focus was to now just go ahead and set the trolling motor on the side and remove these two on the side panels. These covers are actually held in by two size 3 Phillips screws. You can actually remove these pretty easy once you find the main holes there on each side. It's only 2 screws total for each panel. It'll only take about no more than a minute to remove that. But what I do is I just gently pull it off and not forcefully, because this is a pretty delicate piece for just being a panel, but ideally I don't want to rip any of the cables or cord or cause any damage. Now here's another demonstration that I'm on the opposing side of the Minn kota trolling motor, and again removing the panels. So I fast forward and remove that, and now from here this is going to be the main cover that pretty much is like the brains of it. You'll notice that if you try to yank it off, it's not going to budge very well. So what you want to look for on the side is there's 2 little areas where you can access with your fingertips to clip in, because this is pretty much a clip-in piece. Where I'm pointing out here is you want to push in, and it's going to be the same on the opposing side. And here I'll zoom in and I'll show you right there, that little hole. You want to push that in gently on both sides, so that way when you bring it up, you can gently pop that up. Now don't be too forceful with it, because again, this is the main brains of the whole compartment. Now that we have the whole wires exposed, what I try to do is I try to gently rest it over there. You're primarily going to be looking for the black and white cables. Now these cables running through here at this moment, what you're going to see is I will have to remove that screw, because it's actually a grommet that holds the cables in place. So the reason I have to remove that is I got to feed this through. So I'm going to show you here, this is the power and ground wire. You'll notice that on the stock power drive unit, you're going to find, well, that's me pointing out again to the grommet. Let me just go ahead and take care of this real quick. And it's pretty much, again, it's just the same Phillips screw that I used to remove the side panels. Once that comes off, you have full access. Make sure to keep your screws organized, because it's very easy for these things to fall over and lose their placement. So here I am demonstrating, what the heck's going on here? Okay, I'm trying to figure out where it's going to be the proper length for this to run. So this is where I'm supposed to go ahead and feed this through, but I think what I end up doing is I just connect the cables for now. So you'll notice here on the stock compartment in the back, there's a black and white cable. What you want to do is gently pull these apart. The reason I say gently is because if you pull them from the ends and not the plastic piece, you can pretty much damage the cables, and then you're going to be dealing with another headache. You really don't want to have that. So just work them back and forth, wiggle them as you pull them apart. That way you don't damage anything. What I do here now is I have the aftermarket part that I'm adding on to the trolling motor, and you want to make sure you line up the white cable to the white cable and the black cable to the black cable. Pretty simple, right? So again, this shouldn't be a forceful process. Everything should just snap into place. It should be nice and smooth. Once you insert it, you'll hear a click. It's going to give you a sign that it's been fully inserted, and that way it gives you a little bit more confidence knowing that you did it right. Now you notice here I don't really forcefully do it. I just wiggle them in until I hear that click. So now that I have that main compartments wrapped up and they now have connection, it should be able to detect, but we don't want to leave these cables exposed. So what you want to pull out is this heat shrink wrap. I should have used some scissors, would have provided a cleaner cut, but unfortunately I didn't have a pair at the time, so I used these shears. Once you cut that down to, I want to say maybe about 1 inch, you want to cover up any of the exposed metal or copper wires, and ideally use a heat gun. Because of my ignorance of the fact that I didn't have a heat gun at the moment, you can shrink these down with a flame or a lighter or any kind of match, but just be very cautious when you do this. I've done this before when I didn't have my heat gun in my hands, so just take your time while heating this up, and that way it can shrink off. Now as it shrinks down, you're going to want to pinch the ends, and what I do is I grab a set of these pliers and heat up the very tip, and the reason I do that is I want to get it fresh. So nice and heated up, so at the point where I put these pliers on, I tighten that cap. So the reason I do that is kind of closes it off, so to prevent it from ever touching any at the point of contact. The last thing you would want to do is have this out on the water and have a major malfunction because you didn't do the proper job correctly. So there's I am just ensuring that I shrink wrap that correctly, and then we will do the same to the other. So now with the final piece being crimped down with the pliers, I put my focus now on the main connector that comes from the board, which we just attached to that, which is the female connector that's going to connect to the new piece, which is going to be the male connector. Now if you look closely, you'll see each piece has a little grommet or a sleeve, so these things are perfectly aligned. When you're doing this, never forcefully force them to try to go into a connection. They should be a smooth transition where they just slide right back in, and it should be no type of restriction or resistance. So, but that's a different note. So as you can see, is once you get those in, just make sure you have a nice tight seal, push them in. Should be no restriction or resistance. I have all of the main components connected, and I really wanted to see if the motor was going to turn on. So here I removed the main mini kota trolling motor Ipilot Remote. Now this thing has 3 AAA batteries in the back. You can take those out with 2 screws. I'll remove this front little plastic piece, which displays an example of what to look for. This thing should fire up as soon as you hold down one of the buttons. I believe it's the home button. Let's see, I think I hold down the home button, and yep, it should light up. There you go.
So in this segment here, we're going to look at the main grommet that holds the cables up against the bottom of the control board. You see this open gap right here? This is where your power supply and negative cable is going to be run through. You want to make sure it's fed through that. This one here is the stock unit that also comes in with the trolling motor. And the third one on the far left is where you're going to run the additional cable that's being connected to the motherboard. With this, you want to just go ahead and make sure you tighten it down pretty good. As you slide this valve cover back on, make sure you're not pinching or crimping any of the cables on top of one another. The last thing you would want is to have any kind of open contact there with other cables that might potentially ruin your day on a good day of fishing. Don't forget to make sure that the valve side cover clips go in smoothly, so you should hear clips once you push them back in. I think I show you a focus right here in this area. See that point? What you want to do, and on the opposite side, you want to make sure that when that's fully lined up and good to go, you just give it a nice little push. There should be no resistance, no there should be any kind of popping or cracking, just making sure you get it smooth back in. Here we're going to go ahead and reinstall the valve covers, just like we took it off. It's going to be 4 screws, 2 for each side. So it's pretty easy. 1, 2, 3, and you're done. Okay, in this stage, we pretty much skipped the pairing of the remote to the motor. What we're going to end up doing here is, you can look this up and find it online, but I put some context up there for you to follow. Basically here in this area, I'm just making sure that the remote is accessing the wireless features controls and it is responding. You will notice that every time you do access a command, you're onto the remote to the motor, you'll hear a verbal acknowledgement through the remote itself, letting you know there's some systems actions are being taken place. Here I was trying to turn on the motor itself, but again, this is my first time using it, so I wasn't aware you're supposed to push the center button of the remote to get the prop to turn. But I want you to notice something, because eventually when I do sit down here and I get the motor to turn, listen to how noisy it is. You hear that rumbling? That rumbling is the internal compartments that are rotating, and even that little whistling. I think this motor is probably at its lifespan, and for the next video I will be actually pulling this out and rebuilding the entire unit. Stay tuned. Thanks for watching. Hey, I also want to give a big shout out to Northland Marine. They have all the parts and accessories you need for a mini kota trolling motor, from the small thrust to larger thrust. And I'd highly suggest that you reach out to them for any of your parts. I'll put their links in the description. Also, if you're going to take this type of task on, you might want to get acclimated with a lot of the schematics that they have available on their website also. It will give you a good detail and scope of what you'll be dealing with. And for those who made it this long, stay tuned. Here's a quick clip from what happened at New Melones when I took my motor out with the Spotlock for the very first time. Thank you guys for watching. Take care.
Alright. First official run. See if she works. Wow, it's so weird. It's so weird not to have that foot pedal anymore. There we go, come on. There we go. Oh, this is good. Oh, I hope so. Please, Lord. Come on, baby. Oh, yeah. Ah.
Oh, he's a good one.
Net man. I need you.
Did I get him?
Yep, you got him.
Good job, huh?
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Wow, there you go. That's a nice new Melones bass. It's almost big as the one you had, Mr. Bass. Thank you, sir. As always, what do we tell the future viewers? Subscribe, people. George is catching bass again. It's summertime. Subscribe. There you go. Yes.